Imagine for a second a story from early American history that reads less like a dry textbook and, I don't know, more like a high-stakes psychological thriller.
Oh, yeah. Like, we are definitely not talking about powdered wigs and polite society here.
Right, exactly. I want you to picture the gritty, mud-slicked streets of early 18th century New York, just a brutal frontier
It's
town.
truly broody.
It's a world of feral street urchins, ruthless smugglers, and, the bloody, chaotic backdrop of the American Revolution. And right at the center of all of this is an age-old battle between absolute destruction and quiet cultivation.
Quite the setup.
It really is. So, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are looking at a historical account that completely blew me away. It's a text called Harleen, a colonial revolution of love and chaos.
Such a fascinating source.
Right. It traces the incredibly turbulent life of a woman born in a 1701 New York brothel who somehow managed to survive an entire century of massive societal upheaval.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really examine the life of this woman, Harleen Quinzel. Because we're not just going to look at this as a remarkable survival story, though, I mean, it certainly is that on a purely physical level.
For sure.
We are going to use her life as a fascinating case study. It's an exploration of how real people, when pushed to the absolute brink by their environment, are forced to choose.
Between becoming agents of destruction or architects of peace.
Exactly. It is a profound look at the psychology of survival in a world that honestly seems custom-built to break you.
Okay, let's unpack this because we really need to set the scene to understand the kind of pressure Harleen was under from day one.
Oh, absolutely.
We are going back to October 31st, 1701. New York City is booming, dangerous, and completely unforgiving. Harleen is born in a Pearl Street brothel at 3 in the morning to a former French acrobat.
And the text makes a point to note a very strange defining trait right from the start.
Right, she didn't cry when she was born,
Yeah, she was born smiling.
which is just wild to think about. And she carries that into her childhood. By the time she's 12, she's surviving purely by her wits, picking pockets in the markets, and heavily relying on her charm.
And frankly, she's a bit too clever for her own good.
Definitely. But across the street, in a cramped, miserable Crown Street tenement, another kid is born that exact same year, Jack Napier.
And Jack is entirely different.
Completely. Jack never feared consequences. Whether it was the local magistrate, the British soldiers, a beating, he just laughed in the face of danger.
And, that laughter is a crucial psychological marker, especially when you consider the era.
How so?
Well, in a highly punitive society like colonial New York, survival depends almost entirely on a healthy, ingrained fear of authority.
Right, you stay in line to avoid the stocks or the gallows.
Exactly. A child who laughs at the lash is a child who is fundamentally detached from the social contract.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Harleen uses humor and charm as tools to survive. She smiles to manipulate a situation, to deflect danger so she can live another day. But Jack...
He uses laughter as an act of pure defiance.
Right. He doesn't want to deflect danger. He actively wants to invite it.
So that collision course finally happens in 1715, and the way the text describes it is incredibly cinematic.
It really jumps off the page.
It does. Jack is running for his life through the market from a butcher after stealing a chicken. Harleen is just standing there watching this play out, and for reasons she doesn't even fully understand herself, she sticks her foot out and trips him.
Just completely on impulse.
Yeah. She saves him from a beating by snatching the chicken and running, leaving the furious butcher with an empty-handed, grinning Jack.
And from that single moment, they become completely inseparable.
Right. They are running the streets together, pulling off small heists, watching each other's backs. It paints a picture of two stray cats surviving a brutal city.
And they aren't just feral. They're huddled together for warmth because the rest of the world essentially views them as pests.
Absolutely. They rely on each other because no one else is looking out for them.
It's a profound trauma bond.
Hmm.
I mean, there are two discarded people who find a mirrored reflection in one another.
Yeah, but there's a flaw there.
Yeah, a huge one.
Yeah.
The fundamental flaw in that stray cat dynamic is that while Harleen wants to find a safe alleyway to rest in, Jack increasingly wants to burn the entire city down.
Which brings us to the breaking point. Because the narrative doesn't just slowly shift, it shatters in 1722.
Oh, yeah, the ship heist.
Right. Jack plans what is supposed to be their final masterpiece job. They are going to rob a docked British ship, take the gold, and disappear to start a real life.
Sounds like a solid plan.
It does. So Harleen sneaks down to the harbor at midnight, ready for the heist, but she arrives to find the ship already completely engulfed in flames.
Just an absolute inferno.
Yeah, and Jack isn't carrying bags of gold. He is just standing there on the docks, the massive fire lighting up his face. Harleen is frantic, asking what he did with the money, and he just looks at her and says, "We're not thieves, Harleen. We're legends."
Such a chilling line.
It really is. The British soldiers swarm the docks, muskets are firing everywhere, and Harleen is forced to dive into the water and run for her life. She fully believes Jack might have just died in that fire.
Right.
But okay, I have to push back on Jack's logic here. Wait, if they were just surviving, why on earth did Jack burn the ship? Wasn't the gold the entire point of the heist?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. If you are a poor, desperate kid in 1722, you take the money, you don't burn it.
Well, what's fascinating here is the complete divergence between survival and ideology. You were looking at it rationally. Take the gold, buy property, secure your future.
Right, the logical thing.
Exactly. Harleen wanted freedom, and in that society, gold buys freedom. But Jack didn't want freedom. Jack wanted chaos.
Wow.
He realized, even at 21 years old, that fear and spectacle held significantly more power than stolen currency.
Because money runs out.
Exactly. Money gets spent, it runs out.
Yep.
But burning a massive British galleon to the waterline, that makes you a myth.
So he wasn't even trying to escape the system.
No, Jack wasn't trying to escape the brutal, oppressive system of colonial New York. He was trying to become the fire that burned it to ashes. He sacrificed their literal survival to secure his own infamy.
And that hunger for infamy forces Harleen into exile. She vanishes from New York entirely. For 18 years, she is just a ghost.
Completely off the grid.
Yeah, the text details her working as a smuggler down in the treacherous waters of the Carolinas, running card games in Charleston. And she hardens.
She has to.
Right, she learns how to fight, how to negotiate with cutthroats. But the pull of her hometown is too strong. She finally steps off a ship back in New York in July 1740, wrapped in a dark red cloak.
Such a great visual.
It is.
Yeah.
She is no longer that scared teenage pickpocket. She is a seasoned, lethal survivor. And this is where the trajectory of her life alters completely.
Because of the whispers.
Exactly. She starts hearing whispers among the dock workers about a strange woman living in a hidden, walled garden far beyond the city limits. Isabella Ivywood.
And Isabella is a profoundly important figure in this narrative. She serves as the ultimate counterbalance to Jack.
How so?
Well, she is a botanist and a healer. She exists literally and metaphorically on the fringes of society, cultivating life in a world that is obsessed with industry and expansion.
So Harleen seeks her out of sheer curiosity, and they end up forming this incredibly unique, symbiotic partnership.
Yeah, their skills complement each other perfectly.
They really do. Isabella is brilliant. She brews medicines, she understands the intricate science of the natural world. But to operate an apothecary safely as an unmarried woman in 1740s New York,
She needs a protection.
serious protection from local gangs and corrupt officials. So Harleen steps in to become that protection. Harleen handles the gritty business, the supply chain negotiations, the physical threats, the intimidation.
The muscle, basically.
Exactly. And out of this highly practical business arrangement, a really beautiful slow burn romance develops.
Yeah.
It is finally solidified after a massive argument.
Oh, the argument about the docks.
Right. Isabella gets furious that Harleen is constantly risking her life down on the violent docks to secure supplies. It is the first time someone has ever been angry at Harleen simply because they wanted her to be safe.
Which is huge for her.
It is. But hearing that made me pause, and I have to challenge this shift in her lifestyle. Harleen spent her entire life running toward danger, thriving on adrenaline.
Sure.
Did Harleen just swap one dependency for another? I mean, is she just hiding in Isabella's garden because she's terrified of the city, essentially trading her reliance on Jack for a reliance on Isabella?
That is a very natural assumption to make when you see someone pivot so drastically.
Yeah.
But I would argue it misses the underlying psychological mechanics of what is actually happening.
Okay, tell me more.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at how a garden actually functions. A garden requires extreme patience, daily monotonous effort, predictability, and a deep investment in the future. It represents cultivation. It is the exact polar opposite of Jack's fire, which consumes everything instantly and leaves nothing behind to grow.
Oh, wow. I love that contrast.
Yeah, Harleen isn't hiding from the world. She is actively building a sanctuary within it. When you survive severe trauma, routine and safety can initially feel like boredom or dependency.
Because your brain isn't used to it.
Exactly. But what Harleen is experiencing is her nervous system finally regulating. Jack needed Harleen to be an accomplice in his chaos. Isabella simply wants Harleen to exist. It's a radical, healing shift in Harleen's psychological environment.
That reframes it entirely. She goes from surviving day to day to actually putting roots into the soil, and they build this incredibly peaceful life together for 20 years. They are thriving.
But history rarely lets peace go untested.
Unfortunately, no. By 1760, Harleen is nearly 60 years old. The text notes she still carries herself with this absolute terrifying confidence, but she starts hearing a familiar name echoing in the local taverns.
Jack Napier.
Jack Napier. She can't ignore it. She tracks the whispers to a dark, smoky tavern right on the edge of the docks. She walks in, and there he is.
After all that time.
His red hair is heavily streaked with silver now, but that chilling smile hasn't changed a bit. He looks up from his drink and just casually says, "Took you long enough, doll?"
It is a deeply unsettling reunion. Harleen realizes in a fraction of a second that Jack has not evolved whatsoever.
He's exactly the same.
Yeah, he has aged physically, but his internal landscape has remained completely frozen in that destructive state. And it is vital to note that he's returned to New York at a very specific, volatile moment in history.
Absolutely. The American Revolution is actively brewing. The city is a powder keg. Jack is now leading this heavily armed radical gang called the Laughing Sons.
Right.
And they are thriving on the skyrocketing tension in the colonies. We're talking about the era surrounding the 1770 Boston Massacre, where public anger is boiling over into outright street warfare.
It's pure chaos.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you read about Jack's gang, it feels less like a political movement and more like a biological parasite.
Yes, the text is very clear that Jack cares absolutely nothing for taxation or representation.
Exactly. They are feeding off the legitimate political grievances of the colonists. While the actual revolutionaries are protesting British policies or trying to dismantle unjust tax systems, Jack's gang is using the cover of those protests to burn down local orphanages or rob innocent merchants.
Just terrible stuff.
They are taking the genuine desire for liberty and twisting it into an excuse for sheer, unadulterated terror.
And the historical irony here is profound.
How so?
Well, think about it. The American colonies are fighting a brutal war to establish a highly structured new republic, right? To draft constitutions and create new laws.
Yeah, to build something new.
But Jack wants pure nihilism. He doesn't want to replace the king with a president. He wants no government at all.
Just anarchy.
Exactly. He wants to prove that underneath the powdered wigs and the political philosophy, everyone is just as monstrous and self-serving as he is when the rules are violently stripped away.
Which eventually forces Harleen into an impossible corner. On July 4th, 1776, literally as the Declaration of Independence is being signed and the broader course of history is playing out in the background.
What a setting.
Right. Harleen meets Jack alone in an abandoned harbor warehouse. Cannons are going off in the distance, but inside it is just the two of them. She looks at him, this man who has haunted her entire existence, and she realizes he isn't a ghost. He isn't a myth.
He's just a man.
He is just a deeply broken man, and she pulls her pistol and shoots him. Even as he collapses, choking on his own blood, he flashes that same grin and whispers, "See you in the next life, doll."
And that confrontation is the ultimate climax of Harleen's internal struggle.
It has to be.
Yeah. I mean, pulling that trigger is a literal, desperate act of violence to stop a threat, yes. But metaphorically, it is a definitive rejection of the chaos she was born into.
She's ending the cycle.
Exactly. She is looking directly at the embodiment of her own traumatic past. The man who taught her that the world is nothing more than a cruel joke, and she is definitively stating, no, I reject this philosophy.
Wow.
It is the moment she fully, unreservedly claims ownership of her own life and her own future.
And in a standard story, that would be the neat conclusion. The villain is dead, the revolution ends, America becomes a new nation.
But this isn't a standard story.
Not at all. We move into the 1780s, and Harleen and Isabella take their apothecary business to the next level. They open a massive, beautiful shop near Wall Street. They become incredibly wealthy, highly respected businesswomen in this new republic.
They really establish themselves.
They do. But the text reveals a massive secret about how they maintain that safety. To ensure no one ever threatened Isabella or their business again, Harleen actually steps into the power vacuum Jack left behind and takes over his entire criminal network.
A huge twist.
Which made me stop reading and just stare at the page.
Hold on, she becomes a mob
Yeah,
boss.
essentially. How does commanding a colonial crime syndicate align with wanting a peaceful life, cultivating herbs with Isabella? It feels like she just became the very thing she killed.
I get that. It absolutely appears to be a massive contradiction on the surface, and this raises an important question about the nature of power in a transitional post-war society.
Right, because New York was a mess.
Exactly. You have to remember the intense reality of New York after the Revolution. The British had evacuated, leaving the city partially burned, heavily corrupt, and incredibly dangerous.
So someone had to be in charge.
Right. Harleen understands the mechanics of the streets better than anyone. She knows that a sudden power vacuum in the underworld will just lead to endless, bloody turf wars.
Oh, I see.
So she takes control of the infrastructure, not to cause harm, but to enforce stability. She bribes the right magistrates, she controls the docks, she acts as the ultimate gatekeeper.
She's keeping the peace her own way.
Basically, she is essentially building an invisible iron wall around her and Isabella's peace. It is undeniably morally gray, but it is a highly pragmatic, deeply calculated survival strategy.
Pragmatic, sure, but playing in the mud means you are going to get dirty, and it comes with a terrifying cost.
It always does.
Because in 1785, Harleen is at this opulent high society masquerade ball. She is dressed in red silk, wearing a black lace mask, mingling with the city's elite. And across the ballroom, she hears a laugh that instantly freezes her blood.
It's not Jack, though.
No, Jack is dead. It is a 25-year-old copycat, a young man who has heard the myths and decided to take up the mantle in the name of the Joker. The cycle of chaos is trying to start all over again.
It's chilling.
By 1790, she manages to track this new Joker to a warehouse eerily similar to where she killed Jack. She has her gun pointed right at his chest. She calls him a child playing a dangerous game,
Yeah.
but when this kid goads her, daring her to shoot him, Harleen hesitates.
She can't pull the trigger.
Right. Her finger is on the trigger, but she can't do it. And before she can process why she's hesitating, Isabella steps out of the shadows of the doorway, raises her own pistol, and shoots the copycat instead. Isabella makes the horrific choice for her.
Which is arguably the most monumental turning point in their entire dynamic.
Really?
Oh, definitely. First, the very existence of this copycat proves something terrifying. Jack's idea, the contagious concept of the Joker, has successfully outlived his physical body.
He became a myth, just like he wanted.
Exactly as he intended back in 1722 on those burning docks. But Isabella stepping out of the shadows and pulling that trigger is the most profound act of love in the entire narrative.
How so?
Think about their history. Harleen has spent her whole life standing in front of Isabella, acting as the shield against the darkness of the city.
Right.
By firing that shot, Isabella is proving that their partnership is truly equal. She refuses to let Harleen carry the burden of murder again. Isabella, the healer, is willing to bear the permanent moral stain of violence in order to protect Harleen's soul and physically end the cycle.
Wow. It is an incredibly heavy, powerful moment. And the weight of that action finally convinces them they can't control the underworld forever.
They have to get out.
They dismantle the network, they step away, they retire and move to a stunning, quiet estate miles out of the city, right on the Hudson River. The text makes a beautiful note that out there, listening to the water, Harleen finally sleeps through the night for the first time in her life.
She finally gets some peace.
She does. But the ghost of Jack Napier is like a virus. It's 1810. Harleen is nearly 80 years old. She's taking a rare trip into a Manhattan market, and she overhears a conversation. A man was found near the docks with his mouth cut into a horrific grin.
Oh, no.
A calling card was left behind. Another Joker has emerged.
It really demonstrates how deeply ingrained the desire for chaotic rebellion is in the human psyche. The myth always finds a new host.
It does. Harleen tells Isabella she has to handle it one last time. She uses her old contacts and tracks this new, arrogant imitator to a loud, smoky gambling house. And the scene is brilliant because you expect another warehouse showdown, another gunfight.
Right, some big climax.
But she just sits down at the table across from this young man. She looks him dead in the eye and she simply whispers, "Stop while you're still breathing." And then she stands up, turns her back on him, and walks out the door. Just leaves.
Such a power move.
It really is. Reading that, it immediately reminded me of a recovering addict. It's like an addict who has been sober for decades, sitting at a bar, looking at a freshly poured drink right in front of them.
That's a great comparison.
The temptation for chaos is right there. But instead of taking a sip or flipping the table in a rage and starting a brawl, they just calmly pay the tab and walk out the door. So what does this all mean? Why is the act of simply walking away from this fight so much more powerful than drawing her weapon?
Because it is the exact moment Harleen truly, definitively achieves victory.
Really? Just by walking away?
Yes. True victory isn't about killing every single enemy that rises against you. It's about starving the enemy of your attention.
Ah, I see.
This young man in the gambling house is adopting the Joker persona because he's desperate to be feared. He wants an audience for his chaos. If Harleen fights him, she validates him.
She gives him what he wants.
Exactly. By refusing to engage, by simply giving him a piece of advice and walking away, Harleen officially strips the legacy of the Joker of its power over her life. She realizes that she doesn't have to control the criminal underworld to be safe. She wins the lifelong war by simply stepping off the battlefield entirely.
And because she finally steps off that battlefield, she gets the exact ending she fought a century for. Isabella passes away peacefully in her sleep in May 1855, with Harleen sitting right beside her, holding her hand and whispering, "I love you."
A quiet end.
Yeah. And 5 years later, on October 31st, 1860, on her own birthday, Harleen passes away sitting quietly beneath a massive willow tree in their garden. The text says she felt Isabella's presence in the breeze, completely at peace.
What a journey.
It is a staggering 150-year arc. And looking at this incredible journey, it makes you realize how applicable this is to anyone listening today.
Oh, totally.
We all have these fires in our own lives. It might not be a colonial smuggling ring, but maybe it's a toxic behavioral cycle you can't seem to break out of, a chaotic relationship that completely drains your energy, or a high-stress environment you've convinced yourself you need in order to survive.
We all have our version of it.
Exactly. Harleen's story proves that you absolutely do not have to let your origins dictate your ending. You do not have to keep playing a game that is designed to destroy you. You can actively choose to pay the tab and walk away. You can choose to plant a garden instead of striking a match.
That is the perfect distillation of her life. And, it leaves us with a deeply fascinating paradox to consider.
What's that?
Well, history, as a rule, is obsessed with the loud, destructive legends. We remember the men who burned ships and called themselves the Joker. They get the headlines, the infamy, the myths.
Right.
But Harleen and Isabella died quietly on a river estate, their names completely fading from the history books, precisely because they were happy. They had absolutely no need to leave a scar on the world to prove they existed.
Wow.
So it begs a profound question for you to mull over. In your own life, when you look at the legacy you're actively building right now, would you rather be a chaotic legend that people fear or an anonymous success story that finally found peace?